My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the battle of ideas.
I think when you and I last spoke, I was at TNT Radio. Now I'm at UK Column.
Yeah, that's right. I think the last time we spoke, I was on with the Burundian colleague of mine, Christian Daragije.
Yes.
And we were talking about the African high-speed continental railway.
Which nobody knows about.
So if you want to talk about that instead, it's much nicer than talking about insurgencies and terrorism. So if you want to switch to sane ground, we can talk about the continental high-speed, transformative, qualitative changes that you cannot number that it'll bring to the continent. But A, nobody is interested because it's a railway and they think it's boring. 2, nobody cares. And 3, worst of all, nobody except Tanzania and Ethiopia are doing anything about it. So, hey, let's talk about it.
It's weird though.
Oh, yeah. Is it weird or what?
Yeah, it is very odd. But you know what? You're also South African, although you don't live in South Africa anymore, but I still do. And people don't care about Africa. I've noticed.
Africans don't care about Africa. Africans don't care about Africa. That's one of the big problems. You know, we can't just blame it on people not building the damn railway, because Tanzania have all but finished their section. You know, it's done. Each country has its own part to play, and Tanzania have just blown away all preconceptions about possibilities and have almost completed their entire section. And they have done this so superbly. And of course, this is heading towards Burundi, Rwanda, and the DRC. So it's directly going to unlock those landlocked countries. And Burundi are super keen to get their section going. But you have so much opposition to it. And mostly you have this like head in the sand attitude. Well, it's just a railway and, we can't afford it. Like hell. Like hell. So how much all these wars and insurgencies and all the other trauma and trouble costing, and yet you say you can't afford to build a measly little section of super modernized high-speed railway, which will completely change the entire continent. So, yeah, it's insane.
South Africa's got high-speed trains, as you know, but it's also just a complete corrupt mess.
Yeah. And they are failing to do the obvious. The key thing with the railway line is it connects. So it's the connection from country to country, from capital to capital.
Yes.
And that's the important issue.
Yes, that's what... That's exactly right. So, and this is coming in with help from the Chinese, but, nobody actually knows. But there's a high-speed rail network that's being supposedly built around the entire continent. But the countries themselves can't get themselves together.
Can't get their asses in gear, basically. Just call a spade a spade. Yeah, totally. And of course, you see, you have so many countries who are not able to achieve it because of various issues, like DRC and Burundi, where they're waging a war, full-scale war. So this is one thing that's holding many countries back. Another thing that's holding other countries back is government. You have so many imperialist governments on the continent. And, like why I say that, well, they're using imperial policy, British Empire imperial policy to run their countries, which is why we see this tiny percentage of super rich elite, little trickle-down effect, and everybody else is living a very, very low standard of living. So that's another issue. And there's no thing from the UN, there's no like, hey, man, let's build this amazing project, which can be done in 12 to 13 years. That's already been, a proposal was put forward by Roland Datakuba, the Nigerian Bethlehem Infrastructure Incorporated. He's an incredible man. He devised this program to fast track the entire project, or at least the 6 flagship lines. You've got lines going north, south, east, west, and then one all the way around the continent. And he said it can be done. Like nothing gets taken up. Nothing gets taken up because, you know.
I wonder though, I wonder, sorry for jumping, but I wonder if that's also part of the design, you know, from external forces to keep to keep Africa fairly backwards and destabilized.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a Malthusian. I mean, it's a Malthusian program. You know, it's Henry Kissinger's NSSM, National State Security Memorandum 200, when Kissinger came out and, you know, said that we have to keep these regions destabilized so that we can have access to our minerals because it's more secure. So, I mean, that's a long, ongoing and on-running program. But you have your institutions like the African Union who should be standing up for such, for mega infrastructure, and they don't. The African Union is a sadly captured body, very sadly captured.
Now, there is a segue. I do want to actually chat about all your research into Nigeria, because that is an absolutely fascinating part of geopolitics that is, I think, in many ways suppressed. Let me start off with the question, Boko Haram. What is Boko Haram?
Boko Haram are a terrorist group. They first became known around about 2002. Their leader was captured in 2009 by the Nigerian military. And they are very interesting. They are purportedly fighting for jihadism, for Islamic Caliphate. Nowadays we have the addition of a new acronym, a new name. We have ISWAP, the Islamic States of West African Province. So you'll see Boko Haram, you'll see ISWAP. Pretty much all the same thing. It's like a sort of vegetable soup of acronyms that you have in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where you have a plethora of different militia groups. They're all called something else, and they all have these little acronyms. And I think the best way to view that is that Monty Python sketch when they're talking about the PLO. Do you remember that sketch? It's very, very funny. And that kind of like nails the whole thing on the head. So, you know, you just have to look at it for what it is and not be bamboozled, because part of that is to bamboozle people. There's, oh my gosh, there's this militant group and then there's that militant group and they're all fighting each other. And but, you know, if you take the veil off and look beyond it, you've basically just got a vegetable soup of acronyms. So, yeah, Boko Haram, they're in Nigeria. Just to say about Nigeria, it is in a very, very critical state at the moment. This is not being reported, not widely. I looked on a lot of the security blogs, defense and security, and I was absolutely amazed to see how little there is out there. So very little being said about it, and you have chronic increasing instability under this government, this present government of Tinubu, who is, as somebody I met so beautifully put it, part of the criminal mafia. And he's basically working with the rest of the global Western criminal mafia to destabilize and loot Nigeria's resources. That's Boko Haram. Very little to do with religion.
I just want to maybe correct my pronunciation. I said Boko Haram. But I prefer Boko Haram because Haram is more of like a brothel. But although it can apply.
Jerm, can I bore you with reading a quote? Okay, so this hopefully puts it into perspective. I'm going to warn you first, it is boring. It's written in academic ease, so it's designed to dull the mind, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. It won't take long. Okay, so this is about Nigeria, current article. A deepening ethno-sectarian divide threatens to destroy the Nigerian legacy of common citizenship under one shared civic identity. Both the Muslim response to the terrorist atrocities perpetrated by Hamas on October 7, 2023, and recent riots fueled by the radical Christian element have revealed a scale and intensity of inter-ethnic conflict in Nigeria, about which the political class has been largely silent, except for northern Nigeria, where ethno-religious sectarianism has long been an acknowledged reality. The wider establishment and the main political parties have refused to recognize the simmering tensions between different ethnic groups, predominantly sections of the Christian and certain Muslim groups, but also some Fulani and Edo, in central and northern towns of the country, besides a myriad of gangs across many areas. So, okay, here's the laugh, right? I've changed a few key words. I've changed the words Nigeria. I inserted Fulani and Edo and many areas. That's all I changed on that quote, because that was actually written. It's from the Hoover Institute, and it's from an article called Riots and Radicalization, Ethno-Religious Violence and Islamism in Britain. So you see, it's a copy and paste. That's why I inserted that in a recent article. So that with very, very basic changes of names, instead of British, I put Nigerian, and that's all I did. You have what can be described as a program which applies both to Britain and to Nigeria. So all that is media modification, perception modification. So it's telling people that what you have in Britain or what you have in Nigeria is ethno or religious conflict, that all of this is down to Muslims fighting Christians or inter-ethnic conflict. Now, I live in the UK and I know very well that the British aren't racist. And I know very well what they're trying to do, because it's obvious. They're trying to push the narrative that this is a case of fighting for Christian Britain against Islam. There's more to the story than that, but basically that's what the media are trying to push. And they're doing the exact same thing in Nigeria. So they're saying that all that conflict, all those atrocities, and I tell you, my goodness, they're horrendous. All the people dying, everything that's happening in Nigeria is down to religion. So what happens then? People lose their minds. And you have, oh my gosh, it's religion, it's jihad, it's crusade, it's Muslims killing Christians, and then President Trump comes along and talks about Christian genocide. And all of that is simply a ruse. There's only one thing causing what's happening in Nigeria, and that is what is in the soil under people's feet. It's the mineral resources.
So what you're arguing is that the Christians being killed in Nigeria are not being killed because they're Christian. This is a trope that's being used by Western interests.
Yeah.
What's actually going on is the Christians being killed happen to be physically on top of mineral resources. And
the Muslims.
Yes. that is now actually wanted.
You always have this black and white. You have the polarized view, the binary. So you have Christians good, Muslims bad, Muslims good, Christians bad. We've had the same program run in so many countries across the continent. The most stark and the most obvious, of course, was Centrafrique, Central African Republic, which is in Central Africa. And you had, I think it was about 12 years ago now, you had the Seleka rebels who came in, Muslims, and slaughtered the Christians. And then you had this interreligious conflict where you had Christians and Muslims killing each other. That one, you have numerous cases of where this is happening, where it is blamed on religion or ethnicity, when in fact that whole idea and that whole picture is simply to obfuscate what is really happening, which is a mineral resource grab. DRC, the perfect example.
This is very important what you're saying, actually, because there's a nuance here. Christians then are being killed in a brutal way, as are Muslims in Nigeria, but it's not a religious conflict. It's not being driven by Islam. That's the trope. It's actually being driven by Western interests. And
Nigerian interests. And never forget to put that in there, because you have an absolute free-for-all at the moment. It's like the Wild West. It's like open season, come on in and grab your minerals. So to put that into the larger picture, how do we start? Okay, I'm going to take you back to South Africa, and have you heard of an organization called Executive Outcomes? The reason I'm bringing up that subject, and that it's a private military company, PMC, is that they are incredibly important. Their story is incredibly important to assemble and complete that puzzle of Africa. They are the very last piece of the puzzle that once you insert it, the whole thing makes sense. Everything that's been going on the continent since the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, escalation, you then understand what is going on. And what happened with, just to put people in the picture, Executive Outcomes was founded by a Zambian national called Ibn Barlow. And this was in the late 1990s. And what happened was democratic rule and the end of apartheid in South Africa. So many of the soldiers were retrenched. So they found themselves with absolutely no income, no employment, and very little hope of finding any. So what they did was, or what Ibn Barlow did, was he formed this company. It was actually already operating and training in special forces. And they, of course, being South African Defence Force soldiers, also included in the Executive Outcomes, were former Umkhonto we Sizwe soldiers, because they too, the armed wing of the ANC, they too lost their jobs, didn't they? At the end of apartheid, there was no more role to play for Umkhonto we Sizwe. There were also a lot of Angolans when Executive Outcomes was formed. So the fact that there was this huge onslaught on the organization to spread disinformation, outright sheer lies about who they were and what they were doing. Mercenary company in Africa going around destabilizing, causing chaos, killing, murdering. And of course, these were white South African racists. Well, they weren't even all white. There was an array of colors. So that was one of the great myths told about them. Anyway, so Executive Outcomes, their role on the continent is super important. And very, very few, in fact, only a handful of media outlets, alternative media outlets, institutes, anyone reported the truth and what they were actually doing. They are back up and running, something which I wasn't aware of, but they are actually back and up and running. So I'm now going back to the civil war in Sierra Leone, Angola, UNITA, several other, Nigeria, Boko Haram. So all these insurgencies that have been, that Africa has been beleaguered by, Executive Outcomes have a very, very interesting role, and they make sense of it all. So just stop me at any point, Jerm, if I am getting too long-winded and losing track of my point. So I'll explain to you that everything they did, and I didn't know this, you see, I was always under the assumption that Ibn Balo and Executive Outcomes were the bad guys. These guys were the racist white South African mercenaries who were working for De Beers, the diamond corporation in South Africa, Anglo-American, which is the mining. It's the link. Anglo-American and De Beers are the imperial link to City of London. Am I explaining myself okay there? I'm talking about mining interests, MNCs. Okay, so they are the direct link. And I always assumed that Executive Outcomes were the bad guys in it all, and that they were working for De Beers and Anglo-American. The reason I assumed that up until about 18 months, 2 years ago, was that I had read many reports, all of them bad, actually scathing. One of them in particular was an article in what I thought to be highly reputable intelligence journal, where they were called, the article is called London Unleashes Its Dogs of War. And then there's this big diagram explaining how EO and Ibn Balo are connected to the highest echelons of London establishment, Privy Council and all this. So that is what I had seen, and this is why I was so misled about their about the truth about the organization. Anyway, so I happened to be looking for a particular Al Jazeera documentary, because they make great documentaries, Al Jazeera. And I was looking for one in particular, and on the feed up came this interview with Ibn Balo, the founder of Executive Outcomes. And the interview was with a very high-level Egyptian journalist working for Al Jazeera called Yahya Ghanem. And I thought, okay, let's see what this guy is going to say. What is he going to, is he going to talk trot? What is he going to say about his role in all of this and about being an African mercenary company? And so I started listening. And within about 2 minutes, my brain had been shattered. And I thought, okay, everything I have ever heard about them is completely and utterly wrong. And the reason I had that epiphany was such a simple thing. It was beautiful in its simplicity, because the interviewer said to Ibn Balo, he said about this contract they had, the first contract they had in Angola. And the interviewer said to him, so this contract, this was working for the South African government? And Balo says, no, it was a contract with the Angolan government. So I understood then that their whole role was completely the opposite to everything I had assumed or been misled by. So what they did in Angola is they worked for Angolan government, the MPLA, to fight and get rid of UNITA. UNITA were backed by South Africa. I mean, you remember the days when South African soldiers were fighting alongside UNITA. And Savimbi, the leader of UNITA, was heralded as this liberation hero. Okay, so my point being that the narrative about the African continent is to mislead us into thinking that establishment, government, bad, liberation movement, freedom fighters, good. whereas in fact you have an ongoing operation, and all of the wars are all the same war, by the way, all of those wars across the continent. You have insurgents coming in with the sole purpose, in reality, to destabilize a country, to undermine and weaken any sitting government, to create a situation where you have extreme lawlessness, where you have a very weakened state because they are then at war. You have the media, the MSM come in, and their role is to legitimize those liberation movements and to tell the world that they are fighting for their ethnic or religious rights. Whereas in fact, which none of them are. These insurgencies are synthetic. There may be an origin, and in a lot of them, there is an origin which is genuine and has just reason and good reason. But what happens over time very often is that they're hijacked. I have heard this about Boko Haram. So this,
members of 32 Battalion formed part of Executive Outcomes, and they were widely considered the best bush fighters in the world.
They were best of the best. And a lot of the Angolans, and the Angolans, a lot of Angolans went to join EO, former fighters. So, absolutely. So you see, when you talk about them, you're not talking about any mercenary company. You're not talking about any old PMC. You're not talking about Eric Prince and whatever the heck he's doing with Blackwater in DRC right now, and all the other plethora of PMCs. What was different about this EO, we'll call them for simplicity, was that they were formed out of soldiers whose expertise and speciality was fighting bush wars. And what are all of those wars in Africa? They're bush wars, aren't they? They're insurgencies. So you have foreign PMCs come in, like Wagner in Mozambique. They come in to resolve those problems near Cabo Delgado, and they failed terribly. A lot of lives lost, even the Wagner guys, because these are not African PMCs. They're not fighting these wars as they need to be fought. And very often African armies are trained by British, they're trained by American, they're trained by anyone but who they should be trained by on African warfare. So you have armies who are really incorrectly trained. Often their weaponry, and I'm talking about government forces here, not insurgency forces, I'm talking about government forces. They are often, you find a situation where they are, weaponry is deliberately withheld from those government militaries. But we're getting off track here. So if we come...
Yes, bring it back to Boko Haram.
Yeah, bring it back to Boko Haram. Okay, so Boko Haram, I'm going to tell you another story. Okay, so we're going to 2015. By the way, for anyone who wants to read it, these are the books I've been reading. This is Executive Outcomes Against All Odds by Ibn Balo. This will blow your mind, and this is what has been happening on the continent. And another one by him, the second there, The War for Africa by Ibn Balo. This is what you need to read if you want to understand what's been going on, because it is the piece of the puzzle that has been missing. So Boko Haram, okay, and we're going to talk about what happens to far too many of Africa's elections and presidencies. So at the time you had Goodluck Jonathan, President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, in 2014, there was the abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls. I don't know if you recall that. There was a great hoo-ha. All the Hollywood socialites and anyone who wanted to have their name plastered on a magazine was holding up a placard saying, "Bring back our girls, save our girls." And there was this massive hashtag campaign about these young schoolgirls. A lot of them, I think it was about 250 odd, who were abducted by Boko Haram. So what happened at that point was a private security company based in Nigeria were contracted to secure the rescue of these schoolgirls. They then subcontracted to a company called STEP International. And at that time, Ibn Barlow was the chairman of STEP. So they came into Nigeria with the purpose of securing the release of these the schoolgirls. At the same time, whilst they were training Nigerian military, because they always work with a sitting government's military, whilst they were doing this, Boko Haram were on the point, very, very active and very powerful in the northern reaches of Nigeria. And they were on the point of overrunning the Nigerian military in a base called Maiduguri, which is up from Abuja. Abuja is kind of central in Nigeria. So the government of Goodluck Jonathan then said to STEP International, "Leave the schoolgirls for a minute. Can you please help our military and stop them being overrun by Boko Haram?" So STEP then, under Ibn Barlow, trained a Nigerian mobile strike force called MSF 72. Highly effective, extremely well-trained group of individuals, group of Nigerian military to go in and secure this region. Now, it was pretty much came down on them out of the blue, out of nowhere. Okay, so they were then faced with a new mandate. They secured and stabilized a region the size of Belgium in 4 weeks with that strike force. So they effectively pushed Boko Haram back from a vast area in 4 weeks. So the point of that story being, it is entirely possible to stop these insurgencies. It's entirely possible, whichever country you're talking about, and yet it doesn't happen. Or anyone who tries to do that is stopped from doing that. Because what the global elite, or whatever you want to call them, the new name is Epstein class, what they want is a situation where you have a constant state of low-intensity warfare. And that's the desired model for the continent. So the point of that being, Boko Haram were pushed back. That area was secured and stabilized to the point that they could actually hold the elections, which were due that year. Goodluck Jonathan lost his seat, and in came Muhammadu Buhari. The first thing Muhammadu Buhari did, just out of interest, Muhammadu Buhari was Muslim, and President Goodluck Jonathan is a Christian. First thing Buhari did was he cancelled Ibn Barlow and STEP's contract. He told them to leave Nigeria, and he disbanded the mobile strike force formed from the Nigerian military that they had created. So what happened after that was this huge resurgence in Boko Haram, to the point now where the situation is really, really critical. And you have President Tinubu. I put you in the picture about him. He has visited France, and Macron, he is very thick with Macron, and he's visited France more times than he's visited most places in Nigeria. He's been and had the royal tour in Britain, meeting with King Charles, but he's hasn't yet been to the White House. So Tinubu is facilitating what is happening in his country. That's not unique. I mean, this is happening in so many places, Rwanda being the perfect example. And I don't know, Jerm, if I could just swing to the Rwanda deal, because that's very much in the news. You know, the media love to go on about this Rwanda deal and how they must bring back the Rwanda deal, bring back the Rwanda deal, bring back the Rwanda deal. So yeah, you know, the Rwanda deal, if you look at it logistically, that you send, it's a, for those who may not know, to set up a migrant processing center in Rwanda, and then send all the migrants coming to Britain, which is at the moment a huge, huge problem, to Rwanda. And you ask yourself, logistically, are you insane? Because you have Rwanda, a very, very small country in the middle of Central Africa. Why are you wanting to do that? Why are you wanting to send all those migrants halfway across the world on aeroplanes at a huge expense to be processed in Rwanda? Why not just set up something in France or Albania or Romania or anywhere nearer? Why go to the middle of Africa? It's truly, truly bizarre. And of course, the real reason and the only reason that there was ever any talk of this processing center, which so far has cost just that processing center, not all the foreign aid that's gone to Rwanda, but that processing center has cost £700 million, taxpayers' money, and it's not even happened. And that entire story is simply a way of creating a conduit to funnel cash down the throat of Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, to keep his military operation going in eastern Congo, where Rwanda, the Rwandan army, pose as a militant group, Congolese Tutsis, the Banyamulenge, called M23, who are supposedly there to protect the Congolese Tutsi community when they're protecting the mines in Rubaya.
Kagame's a Western puppet. He was put there. I mean, the whole quote unquote Rwandan genocide was a whole insurgency. It wasn't an ethnic tribal war.
Exactly, Jerm. So there we have the prime example where an insurgency was celebrated as the liberators, because that's what they said. They said that about the RPF and Kagame, that he saved the day. He saved Rwandans.
No, he didn't. No. I mean, he was put there. I mean, even the Ugandan side helped him get in.
Did you ever interview a colleague of mine, Keith Harmon-Snow? I think you did, didn't you?
Yes, twice, and sadly
an excellent interview.
And sadly, he died. I think at the end of 2024. Yes,
very sadly, sorely missed. Yeah. So there is your prime example, your classic example of what was created there. And the RPF were an insurgency into Rwanda to destabilize the government of Habyarimana.
How does this relate to Boko Haram? Are you saying that they are an insurgency that the Nigerian government is quite happy to have?
Parts. It creates a gravy train. So the minerals that are there, they're numerous. The two key ones are lithium and uranium and gold. So there is highly credible evidence that lithium and uranium are literally flying out of northern Nigeria. They're building temporary runways, landing aircraft, both military and commercial and private aircraft, loading up and flying off and out of Nigeria. So the minerals are literally being lifted and stolen. Who's doing this? This is being run, it's an operation being run by the exact same multinational corporations that have always been doing it. They've always been rogue. It's just that currently they seem to be super rogue because you have much higher profit margin, you see? Doing it that way. If you think of the mining of uranium, the biggest uranium mine is in Canada, Sichuan or somewhere, and it's a very deep mine, far underground. They have to use robotics. Everything is done with machinery and robotics, and it's an inordinately expensive operation to get that high-grade uranium. It is much, much cheaper for those exact same companies to source it from some Fulani herdsman in Borno State. And that's what it is. You're just looking at higher profit margins. But it's the same chain, it's the same global network. Wonderful Cameroonian author, Charles Onana, who wrote about Congo, about DRC, a wonderful book. He's written many, Holocaust in Congo, and he calls them the international mineral mafia. It's a perfect word for them, and that is what they are. So we're not talking just about the rogue Western nations. We are talking about a global supply chain. Things like lithium.
And so what you're saying also is that Boko Haram are being supplied with Israeli and American tech, as well as Starlink.
Yes, extraordinary. Over 400 Starlink devices have been taken off Boko Haram by the Nigerian military. They have been seen to be using very recent American weaponry. So it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, you know, you go to Trump and what Trump's foreign policy is actually doing in Africa. There's some tremendously good things, some amazing things. So what is happening in Nigeria? I mean, is it the old USAID channels that are operating? Is it CIA? Have they totally got control of things on the ground and the Trump administration doesn't know this is happening? Because there's currently 700 American troops, this is recent, stationed in Nigeria. And then, of course, there was the Christmas Day Sokoto province bombing with the missile from Trump. So, you know, is the White House aware? Are they aware of the fact that their weaponry is landing up in the hands of Boko Haram? I don't know. Or is it an operation that is being hidden from them? Or is it all just the game?
I think many in my audience will agree with the game narrative.
But he has done some extraordinarily good things. I mean, most recently, he sanctioned a number of TPLF. TPLF were the previous government in Ethiopia, turned into a very, very violent movement about 3 years ago, taking parts of Ethiopia. He has sanctioned their leadership. That TPLF were fully Western-backed, by the way. He has sanctioned, also Rwandan. A lot of the RDF, the Rwandan Defense Force, a lot of their leadership has been sanctioned, but they have by Trump, but they've had to lift it because business doesn't operate on the continent without these networks. So it's a complicated story.
It's nuanced and complex. There are multiple layers.
Exactly. And I think that's also part of the trick, isn't it? It's either, you know, Christian or Muslim. It's either good or bad. It's either black or white. It's either hate Trump or love Trump.
False dichotomies.
Exactly. Perfect word. False dichotomies. And the reality and the truth lies somewhere in between. So you have, something happening and they say, oh no, he didn't do that on Tuesday. He did that on Monday. No, it was on Tuesday. No, it was on Monday. No, it's the fact that he did it. That kind of thing. So you always have that being thrown into the debate. It's the red herring game to obfuscate what is the essential argument. Yeah, it's actually really dead simple. That's the thing. It's really, really dead simple. It's so simple. It's beautiful. While you have captured governments, while you have people like, I didn't fit into the story I was telling you about Boko Haram, and the campaign manager for Barack Obama was David Axelrod, who was also the campaign manager for Muhammadu Buhari. While you have this happening, you have very little chance of people actually having the government that they want to represent them. But you have heard, I'm sure, of what's happening in the Alliance of Sahelian States. Very, very exciting, wonderful, wonderful stuff happening there with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And of course, all these countries it was a military coup, bloodless military coups, taking over captured governments, and they are now making incredible changes. They are uplifting the standard of living for their people. They are building infrastructure left, right, and center. They are increasing the health. They're increasing education. They are doing so much good. It's unbelievable. And most importantly, they are keeping control of their mineral reserves. So that's critical to it all. So you have a government that will either say, no, we are going to process our bauxite and turn it into aluminium, and then we'll sell it to you, rather than saying, okay, here's the ore, here's the iron ore, take as much as you want, and can we buy some? Yeah.
You mentioned Kissinger earlier, and I think you were referring to the Kissinger report. I think that was around 1974.
Yeah, NSM 200. Yeah.
Yeah, and in that report, he said that the U.S. must control African resources by controlling African populations, and that was formally adopted, I think, under Ford.
I don't know, but Kissinger is actually written in. There was a CIA, one of the first CIA whistleblowers, a guy called John Stockwell, and he wrote In Search of Enemies. And Kissinger actually told him, because he was the CIA task officer for Angola, and his directive words that came out of Kissinger's mouth was make that Angolan government's life as difficult as possible. So they didn't really care who they funded or who they backed. They wanted to make that new government, this is the government that came in after the end of colonialism, and they just wanted to make their lives as difficult as possible and weaken the state, and make the state economically non-viable, because they're constantly fighting this huge insurgency, actually went an insurgency, UNITA, but fighting this civil war. So that's the game. And then, of course, who was benefiting from that? Well, it was Maurice Tempelsman and all the diamond networks coming through De Beers. So that's how it works. The same thing in Sierra Leone, the most horrendous civil war that's actually happened. So brutal, so utterly brutal. And that was all about diamonds. The whole thing was about diamonds.
Kidnapping is more lucrative than mining in many ways. It feeds into the insurgency narrative.
Yes, exactly. It funds the war effort. It funds the Boko Haram ISWAP war effort, and that's what's happening, and creating enormous instability. The huge areas of northern Nigeria where you cannot travel safely. You just simply cannot travel safely, because these are happening on such a regular basis. And all it is to get the cash.
Kidnapping is more lucrative than mining, and that is therefore a feature.
Well, an even better one. Okay, what they're doing now They have a rehabilitation. This is a UN-inspired program running in Nigeria, a rehabilitation scheme for Boko Haram fighters. And because obviously what do you do? What do you do with a group of people who have been, in many cases, coerced? In many cases, it's the only way of earning an income. It's what you do, isn't it? That's what you do. What do you do with them when they surrender, when they come over and say, I'm tired of fighting, I want out? So anyway, they have this program running now, and it's sadly laughable, because what they're doing is they are applauding is the wrong word. They are giving money to people who were ex-Boko Haram fighters. They're giving them huge, huge amounts of Nigerian naira. And they are doing it to compensate them. So in effect, the thinking is, okay, you can no longer earn a living being a Boko Haram fighter or ISWAP fighter. So we are going to compensate you with this money. It's absolutely atrocious backward thinking. I mean, how you can even consider doing that and compensating people who are former fighters with amounts of money that many people in those outlying rural areas will never see in their lifetimes. It's actually incredible that anyone even thought of that. And it reminds me so much of a recent thing in the UK where one of the Labour ministers came up with the great idea of giving any migrants who wanted to repatriate up to £40,000 for a family of four, £10,000 for an individual to go back to Afghanistan or Somalia. Who came up with that one? They live on another planet. And this same thing is happening where you are rewarding people who are ex-fighters who have done the most horrendous things. And yet you are not helping the people on the ground. I mean, £10,000 to your average Brit is a huge amount of money. 40,000 is massive. And the same thing is happening in Nigeria.
Who's actually running Nigeria? Washington?
No, it isn't at all, actually. Nigeria is very much under, we use the term globalist, under the Epstein class globalist thumb, very much so. France are the lead in a lot of what's happening across West Africa. They were kicked out of the AES states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger all kicked the French out because the terrorism, the ISIS forces, Jenim and all the rest of them, were being allowed to operate under French operations. They were facilitating the rise in these insurgencies, which is what has always happened. So that's why they kicked them out. So now France are cozying up to Cameroon. Recently Macron was in Kenya, cozying up to Ruto, and a few other places. But he got booed out of Kenya. He insulted them so much, I think they booed him out. But no, very much Nigeria is under the control of London. It's Westminster and Paris. The American involvement, I do hold out hopes that there's something very different happening under the Trump administration. I really do. But no, it's firmly in the grip. You remember Nigeria is a former British colony. There are massive ties. I mean, a lot of members of our government are Nigerian, so there's massive ties.
Okay. This is a very fascinating topic. It's very complicated, and I appreciate your attempts to simplify it in this conversation. I think I'm going to invite you back because I want to chat also about that, the high-speed railway network. But for now, how can I follow your work?
I've got a website called africanagenda.net. I'm also on X, but mostly it's my website, and I have 1 or 2 articles on Substack under my name, PD Lawton.
PD Lawton, thank you for joining me in the trenches.